Hi, this is Current Value, and you're watching my masterclass with sound teams. Two main categories: making drums with serum, making bass sounds. The track is going to be Overturn, making drums with addictive drums. There you go. The masterclass is there to actually spark off more interest and to get inspired, to be inspired, to do more and to find out more and experience that by yourself. Hi, this is Current Value, and you're watching my masterclass with sound teams. Two main categories this time. One is going to be a track creation. It's going to be with Ableton and using most of the Ableton plugins. And we have two focuses for that first topic, which is going to be making drums with serum. And the second is making bass sounds, also using serum. The second topic is going to be a track deconstruction of one of my recent releases on Blackout. The track is going to be Overturn. We're going to talk about various different things, this time more going into making drums with addictive drums as opposed to serum. I've been having numerous releases since more than 20 years, for those who aren't that familiar. Releases on Frick Recordings, Technical Itch, Barcode Recordings, for the very early releases I've had, till the more recent releases on Blackout, Invisible Recordings, Bad Taste, Meth Lab, and many more. I've been playing on big festivals such as Let It Roll and Rampage, all the bigger ones, playing really nice clubs like the Bikini, for example, and doing tours in Australia, the US, and even Japan. Okay, so let's dive right into our first topic. Serum is our friend, so that's why I'm going to use serum again. This time, again, randomized down. Do that first thing because we don't want the bass to wobble around phase-wise. It should be firmly hitting with every trigger the same. Every trigger should be the same. Choose a waveform that is morphing. Is always a smart thing to do, and with very simple waveforms to start with. You can get more complicated or build your own wavetables, of course, if you like, but just to show how this is done with a more simple waveform. Activate the modulating oscillator. So this is modulator only. I'm using FM again. The main focus is to make the idea that you have in your head, to the song or the melody or whatever it is, or a sound that you have in your head, to transform that into music. That is the main focus, because that's the most important part. Because you can also start a song and then just one thing gets to another, and then you might as well be lucky enough to complete a whole song. But I think if you have a good idea, just a great inspiration, and you hear these sounds in your head, to make them into music as fast as possible, that is the most important thing. And fast is the important word here. Otherwise, the initial spark of the first of the songs, of the melody parts and sounds that you hear, will be lost very soon, and it will get into something else, which is no problem. But I think everybody dreams of like transforming what he hears or what in his head to make that into music as fast as possible. It could be anything really, but most of the time I use only synthetic content, meaning that I start create the songs, the songs and the sounds from scratch most of the time, and emulate certain physics or certain facets of a true nature sound, and to create these feelings. And the thrill behind it is to be able to transform everything you hear and you feel into parameters, more or less, and to perfectionize this idea. So that's why I could do field recordings and use them, but for me the thrill is to create musical content with synths and in an electronic way. I was always someone that learned stuff by doing and not reading up on things, not watching tutorials, because the actual thrill is to find out by yourself, to experience it, to go through these mistakes that you make, to develop your ears. Your hearing has to get better and better, and then you eventually get to the point where you start creating your own craft, so to speak, to just be able to be as quick as possible, and be true to your ideas, and not just make things like this. Learning by doing is one important part, but try and error is something that gets reduced to a point where you are very dedicated in creating exactly what you want. So most important thing might be, as I might have told you earlier, I don't know. I mean, I read up on something and to say, okay, that's the way they have done it, and that's the way I do it, and there are similarities, and that's interesting, but I don't feel I have missed out on lessons or that kind of thing. I expect them to listen closely, to hear closely, and to really to take all that's in there away, but not see it as a golden recipe. To really just see, okay, that's the way, that's one way to do it, and of course you follow the exact steps first, and then but very soon the goal is to really learn things in a more universal way, so to create your own craft, and to get to the point where you say, okay, interesting point, let me try that, I've never thought of that before, but let's experiment with those parameters, for example, like all the timing stuff, all the envelopes, and that let's alter the envelopes, let's see what happens if we change the times and the parameters, and so the masterclass is there to actually spark off more interest, and to get inspired, to be inspired to do more and to find out more and experience that by yourself. I'd say the most important thing is to stay on things, to never give up, to not let yourself put down by failure or mistake, or even the so-called success, if you don't have that in your life, or have waited for that for a long time. Never stop really, experiencing, growing, creating your craft and being you all the time. That's probably the most important thing. All right, this was Current Value interview for sound teams. All right, bye-bye. Today, we're going to have a masterclass consisting of 2 parts. First part is going to be a track creation using Ableton and mostly Ableton plugins and Serum as the synth. It's actually one of my favorite, it's actually my favorite synth, VST synth, as it's super, super accurate and you can do so many things. It covers a wide range of sound design things that you can do with it, and it's brilliant. Okay, so let's dive in. Before we go to dive into the first part, or the second part is going to be a track deconstruction. Well, we'll get to that in the second video. All right, so open up Ableton, set the BPM speed to 175, for example. I'm going to create a little drum and bass song, and the 2 main focuses will be the drums, making drums in Serum, and secondly, the bass, which I'll also make in Serum. Okay, so let's start right off here. So I'm going to do a small introduction pad maybe for the intro. And let's choose a 32-bar intro. This way I can show you how to make a little pad sound. So it's quite easy, actually. The only thing you need is kind of a multi-saw sound that's going to be achieved in using the unison feature. And I'm going to create a little blur and just dragging the detune up a little bit, and also keep the phase position at randomize, as we do not want to have flange effects when playing the sounds. So I can show you that if you choose the randomize totally off, then that's how your pad sound or multi-saw is going to sound. It's going to sound like a flanged sound, and we don't want that. So we keep it up, fully up in a second as well. And both oscillators are going to go through a low pass filter, which is getting a little envelope here for the filter, so it's slight and very slow movement on the filter. We use this LFO as an envelope, and we'll see what happens. So this is already assigned now. A bit too fast. Something like this, so to have a little bit of a movement in the actual sound, in the pad sound. Okay, so this is pretty basic, and we'll keep it at that. Maybe add a little reverb, just a long and rather dark reverb. Just cut the highs a little bit, put up a little bit of spin and modulation of the reverb. Nothing too drastic. There's a little pop in the beginning, so it might help to just increase the takt time a little bit. Probably generally a bit softer. Polyphony up to the maximum, as we need voices, because we're going to create some chords. In the global settings, you find a quality setting, and for the strings, it's actually not that vital to have them at so much, too high quality in terms of the oversampling settings. So I'd rather save on the CPU power here and just go to 1 time. It's called draft because it's meant to be low quality, but in this case with 2 source and a filter applied like this, you don't have too much high frequency information that is really vital to reproduce a nice synth string sound, which, as you can hear, still sounds very good and it's usable for our purposes here. Okay, as a theme, I thought, okay, let's go for some parallel scale theme. Let's take it from F major to A minor, and just like that. You'll hear what I'm talking about. So that's just a small little motive, and we're going to accompany that through the same string sound, but using just the low end, sort of to create sort of a subby accompaniment. And that's going to be moving parallelly. I'm going to repeat this once. And for the next 8 bars, you're going to add another octave. Oh, something happened. Yep, I was dragged it a little bit too much to the left. That's why I couldn't hear the sound. And for the next 8 bars, we're going to create. I'm just going to show off a little bit of structuring of how you could actually structure your intro and just building up, because in the end of these 32 bars, there's going to be a drop, which actually, so that the intro is there to introduce the drop and the first name. So we need to build up, keep building up. Something again, and again. Some sort of a, cycling through the build-up and just coming back to the second variation, if you want to call it a variation. I mean, it's just an added octave, really. And but that's going to do for a short little representation of what we're doing here. We're going to add another melody at some point, but for now that should be it. So we just have the structure for the 32-bar intro. Okay, so now we get to the first main focus, which will be the drums, building drums in Serum. For that, I'm going to use the drum rack. I could be using the instrument rack as well and assign key zones individually, but I figured it might be just easier to just drag and drop serum instances onto these notes here, onto these places where the actual drums are in the end, and then just play them in their individual key range. Much easier, actually. I mean, you can also separate them in using different velocity ranges, but, you know, we keep it simple. So I'm going to drop some serum instances here, just like that. This way we have different serum instances on different keys. And we're going to start with the kick drum. Let's close everything up so we show it on the right serum instance. Okay, let's just see if we can pre-listen to these sounds. As you can see, I'm just hitting A, W, S, E. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp in translation to the actual note scale. And we're going to start with the first one with C. And that's going to be our kick drum. Kick drums, generally, like electronic kick drums, can or mostly will consist of a pitched sine wave and maybe some noise information, just really roughly. So what we're going to put in here is a sine. This time we need the randomizer totally off because we don't want the sound to jump all across in terms of phase position, as we need it to be played as just like a sample. And so we have to make sure to fixate our phase position. Okay, and I'm going to use the LFO in envelope mode to create a little amp envelope for this oscillator. So that we start off with just about the length of the kick drum. So that actually does it pretty well. Okay, maybe lower the pitch a little bit because the kick should actually be pitched. That will be the bass note of the kick, which is very low at the moment. But let's see what happens if we add the pitch envelope. For that, we're going to use a second LFO device, also in envelope mode. This time I take it off grid here because I want to really fine-tune the length of that pitch envelope, because it's vital to create the exact pitch envelope that's needed for the kick drum, because it actually makes the character of the kick drum in the end. LFO2 goes to global master tune, which is the pitch. Now I switch to unipolar, because as I said, I want this tone to be the bass tone, and switching to unipolar is going to allow for the pitch envelope to be on the positive side only. So it means, as you can hear, the bass note will be the bass note, and as opposed to if it's in both directions. I change my bass note, so it's very confusing. It's better to use the unipolar position. Yes, so as you can hear now, there is already a nice pitch envelope and a kick character, actually. So we have this first fast pitch part, which is the transient itself, which can be fine-tuned and using the exponential or logarithmical curve position here. Just, your ears just decide where to stop. How to shape these curves is absolutely up to anybody's taste, really. There's a few things that are important. This should be in the lower third here. And this, if this is the whole range, the lower third for the slower pitch part, which I call the chest hitting part. I'll just stop where it feels right. Just by about here. 75% envelope, and could look like this, You can draw all kinds of crazy curves here and get a good kick drum, don't get me wrong, but this is the basic way to get something going that is actually, that's what we want for a drum and bass track in general. Okay. And now the noise part that I'm going to use. You have to imagine as if there's a drum set, and if you hit the kick drum, the whole drum set is moving, which it actually is. And this is captured by the overhead mics mostly, and the other open mics that are there. Snare drum is rattling with the kick physically, So what we do here is sort of a emulation of that rattling. So if this is our pitched sine wave kick sound, there's a little reaction time on the rattling, so to speak. And this is going to be a little delayed, so to speak. So let's see how that sounds if we apply this envelope. Also take it off grid so you can have a finer tuning of the length of that envelope. Put it to the pitch, to the noise oscillator level. Sorry. So you can hear there's a little bit, just like a little noise carpet underneath. It has a slow, there's a little latency to it, which makes it actually, if you do this, it sounds rather sounds like a hi-hat on top of a pitched sine wave. So it's better to have a little bit of space between the two events. And then just fine tune. Now you could add a little distortion. Just a bit faddening, so to speak. Nothing too drastic. Just see that the level is over 75%, so you've got a bit of... So you don't need to level it up afterwards. The sounds are all very usable. So we're going to stop here now for the kick. So that's going to be our kick. Onto the snare drum sound. Close the kick sound, and so the snare sound is actually made in a very similar way. So we can again create a little envelope for the level. This time much faster, so that you can hardly hear the actual bass note of the sound. Very important, because if it's too long, it doesn't sound like a snare drum anymore. Simple as that. It might become a different sound. So keep it short. And of course, randomize down, not to forget. Okay, and this time I'm going to use a stereo noise. I actually recorded that myself from Operator. That's why it's called OP noise. And it is a white noise, a white stereo noise that I recorded from Operator. And I'm using that a lot of times for a lot of drum sounds. So you You guys can do that yourself as well. You can just record any stereo noise. You can go outside and record something in the park, a wind noise or something. I mean, or you can have analog snare tails that you can add on top as a sample, and all these kinds of things. So in this time, our noise envelope looks like this, because this time we need a supporting transient information, so to speak. And the rest is going to be similar to the kick envelope. Let's see what happens. Oops, envelope mode, very important. Doesn't sound like much yet, but you get the idea of the snare already. I'm going to put that through a high-pass filter. And we haven't even pitched yet the sound, the sine sound. I'm going to do that now. Very similar, that's very similar to the kick drum sound, but again, a very fast envelope. So we're going to open the matrix again and have LFO3, control the global master tune again. It's too slow. As you can see, there's this little stone throwing element added to the kick drum, to the snare drum sound. And it's all about fine tuning again, just like with the kick, but this time even more delicate, as we're dealing with much shorter time windows for a snare drum sound as opposed to the kick drum sound. Okay, testing the waters with the sound. You can, if you want, parallelly assign your noise amp envelope to the filter cutoff for the noise. Results in a bit of it's more of a slapping character, just very, very slightly. And just use the drive down here to mix the two elements to your liking. And last but not least, to make this sound even more snare sound, just tighten it up a little bit with the distortion, which is actually just the opposite of tightening it up. We're actually smearing it, but tightening in terms of making it a bit heavier. So last but not least, just take a mid-band EQ and automize it, also using this envelope for the noise level and filter cutoff for the noise. As you can hear, this enhances the mids. It's up to you where you put the cutoff frequency and the enhancement band here. Gets you some different character for the sound. You can also play with the chain and with the positions of these. This way you take more care of the level because it's clipped. Because if you do it the other way around, and it's much more dynamic, and you can also hear that there's much more. The material is much more dynamic. So up to you guys. I think I would go this way around this time. Well, there's no golden rule to it, you know, it depends what kind of sound you want to make in the end, and if it fits the drum set in general. Let's keep it this way. This way it's nice and snappy. Just figured this is C and the tune has F and A, F major and A minor. So you might even switch this kick down to A instead of C. Let's just do that. So just take it down to 3 semitones. Just going to even do it here. Or you could also do it from here, from the MIDI instruments, MIDI effects, and just take it down. It's probably better to have it before the actual instrument. This way you don't need to retune it in the actual preset. So that might be better this way around. Okay, so now we have kick and snare. And so while the snare drum is on C, we have the kick drum on A, which pretty much resembles the A minor that we're steering towards in the intro anyway. So just to pre-listen to what's going on with the two sound sets. Okay, number 3. Is going to be our hi-hat. For this, we switch off oscillator A and B and just switch on the noise. Going to use the stereo noise again. This time, maybe use another phase position to avoid phasing in general. Just repitch it a little bit, you know, and change the phase position. Should do. And then have a slightly softened. The thing is, hi-hat could look like this in terms of the level. Right, but now I personally prefer to soften it a little bit, as it's important to not have one sound or one transient mask the other transient. So we've got the kick transient and the snare transient being the absolute most important transients. And so we have to have something soft on top, so it doesn't stand in the way of the kick and the snare transient. So make it a little bit softer. Why am I using the envelope here? Because I want to have a dependency, a velocity dependency on the length of the hi-hat. So for that, we're going to use the velocity and apply it to the length. But there's something else I want to do beforehand. I want to have a level modulation as well, according to the velocity I'm using. And as the this LFO1 is already controlling the level positively, I would like to have at least as much of a range for the velocity, but it's all taken up now from the LFO1. So that's why I switch around, I invert the velocity curve and assign the level negatively. Just a tiny bit, I don't want it too drastic. So now you can hear low level, higher level. So this way I get more range with double assignment of the level, for example. I can do that for the kick as well, for the snare. So I have velocity dependencies in my drum set, which is very important because otherwise it could get very sterile very soon. And now the assignment for the length as well. So this way I make sure lower velocities, lower level, and quicker sound. Shorter sound, sorry. Good. Okay. So now, what else? Increase the level a little bit and have this sound going through a filter because there's still a lot of low frequency information in the hi-hat, in the noise sound. So this sounds much more to my liking. And now I see if everything's okay with this level. I think the level assignment is a bit too strong. Should just go back to 12 or something. Much better. And another thing I want to do, especially for off-heads, I want to soften the attack even more. So I do the assignment. See, at the lower velocity through the inversion and a positive assignment here, I get a softer attack with lower velocity. Just need to fine-tune the assignment. It's a bit sharp when it comes to higher velocities. This is better because we want to have the space-making effect of the transient still, also with high velocities. Now I've got the result that I wanted. It's more like an off shaker that I can use now with the same sound, with the same hi-hat sound. I'll show you in a bit when we create this little drum loop. Okay, so let's go in with the drums here, I suppose. 16 bars, you see how far we take it really with the drums. Oh, that's a bit of a, that was the wrong grid size. Just make it a bit more. Okay. And now we can use copy this over a couple of times and just do a little loop. Okay. So now we should actually take care of the leveling a little bit, that I group this pad, these pad sounds, and take them down a little bit. Okay. All right. So, and now, just to show how that works with the velocity assignment for the hi-hats. How to use this. So for this I have, this is the main head, then there's the off head. So yeah, just take down the velocity, get a slightly softer attack and less level and shorter hi-hats. See, that's how it works. And now I want to have Not yet. Let's just create that. In the end, as we know, it's going to be building up, all the time. So we're going to add more offhats. Just about this. See, in this way, I have with one hi-hat sound from one serum instance, through using the velocity, I have different lengths, different attack, and different level. You could assign it to so many more things, but I think this is just going to do in terms of the... Okay. So that's pretty basic. And you could then mangle your sound through anything you like, distortion, EQ, use different lengths, parameters, just play around with a couple of envelopes and modify them, put some special effects on it, and do whatever. So this is intro, so it means it's quite a rather softish drum set now. For the main part, for the main, we're going to use the same drums, but this time beefed up a little bit. Let's just see what we can do. Let's see, maybe just the simple things that come to mind, just mixing in a distortion, an overdrive. Okay, but I think we need to change the sounds as well. So these ones need to be softened down a little bit. Shorter kick drum, shorter snare drum tail. So in this case, I would use the level envelope of the noise. All right, and the hi-hat could just be made a tiny bit slower. Okay. So this way we have two of the same drum sets, but still a bit heavy. Let's say, take this down a little bit. Also do something to the kick. I don't like the characters still too plain. What I'm doing here is I modify the amp envelope so that, because this amp envelope is parallelly running while the whole sound is pitched, right? So if you change the level in various times here, like this, for example, then you just jump over certain frequency ranges which are enhanced and some of them which are increased. And this results in a more, let's say, interesting sound. It sounds less plain, it sounds a bit more sophisticated. What happens as well is in using these level changes, you send different levels of the sound into your distortion, which changes the character of the distortion over time, which again makes the sound a bit more complex. Let's see what else we can do to slightly improve the sound quality-wise. Example like this. Sounds a bit beefier now. So just enhancing certain frequency ranges, and as it is a pitch, it's a sine pitch, applying different things at different times during the pitch phase creates different characters of the sound. So I did use an EQ now, which again does different things, just distorts the phase of the whole sound. It does things to it that is actually, it's not, I mean, it's derivating from the virginity of the sound. But sometimes, especially when you want to have harder sounds or more sophisticated, more complex sounding sounds, then you have to go away from the plain math and just take up stronger measures, so to speak, to get where you want to get. And this already sounds more profound, let's say, than... But this is a small drum sound, so it's just an intro sound, so it doesn't have the same, doesn't get the same attention in terms of like being beefy, being super present, or it just hints, okay, that's drum and bass, there's going to be an intro, these are going to be the drums, this is going to be the rhythm. Okay. And now we get to, I think we should get to the bass now, and then after that we should be explaining how to mix the whole thing down, and sidechain compression is going to be a very, 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 very important point later on. So some of you might have wondered, why is there a fourth instant of serum? The simple fact is that I wanted to add a cymbal sound, which I'm going to do now before we get to the bass. So for the cymbal sound, we're going to use a different method of synthesis. So I'm not going to use the noise this time. We're going to use FM synthesis. And for that, switch it to randomize as well. Drum sound, sampler characteristic, right? Take these up a little bit in octaves because we need higher ringy sounds, and also use a different semitone. So we take down the second level because we only want to hear the modulated sound. So the oscillator B is only acting as modulator for the oscillator A, and it's modulating the pitch, so it's frequency modulation, FM. So, but now, of course, we need a level envelope again. Again, soften the sound. And then send it through a high-pass filter. And as we have only this key here, which is D sharp, it's a bit confusing because when we play the tone, the root key is still C, but the actual tone is D sharp, as we have C, C sharp, D, D sharp. we only have this key, so we need to optimize the sound towards the rest of the drums and the tune, after all, as well. So it needs to be tuned in a way that it fits. Let's do that. This will be 5 semitones above the snare sound, which is F. And I also hear a quint, which is C again. So we'll leave it at that. It's a good sound. It should actually fit. Right. I want a stereo sound, as this is just a mono cymbal sound now. So to make this a stereo sound, I use another envelope. Use an LFO for the envelope. Make it fine-tunable, so to speak. And then just, instead of using the detune that I just could pull up like this, I don't want this sound to be chorusing around all the time, so I want it to very briefly be modulated up with every trigger and then jump back to 0. So in this way, you just have a phase derivation of left and right unison sound, as it's 2 at the moment, and then jump back to 0 and have no more modulation, so they're fixed in their stereo position, so to speak. This way we have, apart from the kick, where there's no stereo information at the moment. Is there? Let's have a look. As far as I remember, there was no stereo, so we really on the stereo mission here and use a stereo noise sound. And we should do that for the first drum loop as well. Just use my stereo noise, and as it is a bit lower in level, we need to recompensate for the level. You can do this via the envelope or just have the assignment changed. Let's see how it sounds. Yeah. Slightly different phase position. So it goes. Now we can just use the serum instance here, copy it here. No, it's not possible. How do we do this? I think if we just copy it here. Yeah, it's there. So now I just copied the exact same sound. Okay. So this is how to use this thing. And when these off hi-hats come in, you could imagine to add a 4 to the floor cymbal. Okay. I think it's time to go for the bass, but before we do that, I'd like to do the sidechaining beforehand, because I want to show something that has to do with the drum creation and the overall mixdown within the drums that includes sidechain processing, compression already. So let's do it. So I already grouped up the pad sounds, and we're going to, for the sidechain compressor, I'm going to use the Ableton compressor. Sidechaining is going to be rather harsh in its use, so I would just bring this ratio up to infinite and have a quite aggressive timing as well. A lot of threshold, and also use the look ahead function, as it creates a certain future warp effect, so that actually before the transient there is already silence for 10 milliseconds. It's not exactly 10, as the reaction time of the gain reduction is going to be 5.47 milliseconds, the attack, right? So it doesn't go straight away down in an instant, it just takes a bit of time. So in the end, you might have a few milliseconds before every transient silence. For those who don't exactly know what sidechain compression is, you take a signal, you take a, so to speak, you import a signal into your compressor other than the own signal, so to speak. So you externalize your gain reduction trigger, so to speak. So it means if you have for example, this pad sound playing, and you want that kick and snare, for example, should intermit the audio in the mix down, you just hit sidechain compression, and as a source, so now the compressor would actually use the same signal, pad sounds, right? When you hit sidechain, you can choose where the audio for the gain reduction should be coming from. Okay. So for those who assume that I'm going to group the drums, you are right. I'm going to group the drums, but not for the purposes of the sidechain just yet. And I'll explain in a little bit why. So you could go here, choose the drums as sidechain, use peak compression as sidechain, as it's much more accurate and much faster. So be aware, this is very important to have the peak as setting here. And it's also good to have a filter of the sidechain signal. So now at the moment, it's mostly the kick drum that is influencing the gain reduction. Whereas when you put the filter up, it's going to be more and more snare drum signal. But you can't really separate these from each other. You can tilt it towards your liking. But, and now's the big but, why am I not using the drums? In this case, I could be using the drums, as it's short drums, clean drums. There's no problem with the timing, everything's all right. But if I have longer drums, if I have heavier drums, longer kick drums, to create most problems with this, I also have a very long recovery time for the gain reduction. So there's no use putting a very small release time when the actual sound itself is too long. So it can't actually recover from the gain reduction fast enough. So what to do now? So for this purpose, I choose one of these arrangements. I just take the simplest for now, as there's not going to be any off drums just yet. Duplicate it. And what we want as the sidechain signal is kick and snare, right? So that's our goal here. So we're going to kill all the hi-hats. choose a synth sound of our choice. And this time I take operator, make the sound as short as possible without popping and clicking. And you listen to this now, much too long, right? As a trigger for the sidechain, we wanted very short and controllable bursts of input for the sidechain signal, right? So what to do now? We have a very nice tool here called note length. So we put the note length down to something in the mid-20s milliseconds. See that our audio material is artifact-free. No clicking, no nothing, just a clean, super small burst of sound. And now we're going to drag these two events, kick and snare, right here, apart from each other frequentially. Maybe even further apart, for the simple reason that once we use this filter here, we can actually decide the percentage, so to speak, of the focus of our sidechain compression. If it's rather the kick that influences the sidechain or the snare. And if they're just too near to each other, then you can't separate it. So just to be able to actually have more control over that, you just drag these two events apart, and visually you can already see, so put operator now as sidechain signal. So we just sort of extracted what's going on in the drums and perfectionized it for our sidechain purpose via using note length. Super important. And now have so much more controllability. I'm going to call this sidechain signal, maybe sidechain signal. And see what the gain reduction does. See, in this case, the more I put it down in the region of the kick drum, I get more kick drum influence in terms of sidechain compression. The gain reduction will hit more when the kick is being played. Whereas if I put this up, see, it's the opposite. Hardly any kick signal, more snare signal. So you'd actually automate this and then just decide where and when you want what type of sidechain compression, and then fine-tuning your length of the signal that controls the sidechain signal. And the result is very important. You have to switch it off. You don't want the beeping noise in your mixdown in the end, so just switch it off. It will still go into the sidechain here and do everything that you want to have. So it's so short you can hardly hear. It's very technical at the moment. The longer you make the release, we want to have almost the same signal strength of kick and snare. So in this way you have the transients free of anything else. You really make sure that there's next to absolute silence. Oh yeah, put the knee to hard knee, please. As we want a harsh, maximized effect of the sidechain compression. It's a very technical thing. I've seen people drawing volume lines instead of using sidechain, but I think this is just one example of how well a compressor can actually do the sidechain if you use the right signal for, to trigger the gain reduction. To make this a bit stronger in the end, you could as well go and automize the unison. Right. So let's just go to the envelope view. Okay. And then just go from little detune to more and more detune, and then focus back towards the end. So it makes the sound a little richer. I wouldn't do this for the bass down here, for the support sound. This can just stay the same. It's not a problem. Good. So what do we have here now? We have an idea of an intro with elements building up. The next thing I would think of is probably a melody, but we're going to skip the melody for now. We're going to focus more on what actually enhances the drop itself. And for that, we're going to use a noise sweep. I'm going to use operator for that. Spread the stereo. So with the stereo is pretty much the noise that I used to record for the hi-hat in Serum, but without the filter. Just like this. Good. So we're just going to over the length of 8 bars, we're just going to draw a MIDI note here. We're going to increase in level exponentially slightly. And we're also could do this within here, but I'll use an external filter, an equalizer. Just do like a little build-up noise. Nothing drastic, but just to show. That's a bit much, but you get the idea. Okay, and of course we're going to apply the same or a similar. You could always change the threshold or the ratio to soften down the sidechain compression. Okay. And of course we need to use the same sidechain line as well here when the drop is on, when the first main is in place at bar 33, because otherwise we're not going to get any sidechain signal, right? So this has to be built in here. Sidechaining within the drums. Okay, is another issue that I wanted to talk about. You could, and maybe you should, consider sidechaining the high-end signal, which is consisting of hi-hats and cymbals in this case, and use the same compressor on these, not as strong, but just a tiny bit to make more space for the transient. It just creates a different vibe, a different effect. So let's just listen to this. We haven't got any cymbal. Here's the cymbal sounds. We need to play it from here. See? It's not much, but it's just enough to... It's just less plain. There's some sort of interaction, intermodulation happening that makes this very interesting. Let's try what happens if we do the same to the hi-hats. Bit drastic. But if used wisely, you can really create a very nice modular interaction between your drum sounds, even if they're very clean and even without using a compressor on the end, like a master compressor on the chain or something. So it's not needed. This way you have clarity within your drum sounds, and you get more out of your drum set, and it sounds more profound in the end. Let's see if we should do that maybe on the... Well, why not? We could actually try what happens. It's all about trying it out as well, if it's really fitting or not. As you can see, this is so easy to apply, really. Maybe a bit of compensation for the level. Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of like intermodulation, like within the drum set, kick and snare also influence, or can also, they don't have to, but they can influence the higher end spectrum, or let's say the higher end spectrum instruments in your drum sounds. Or if you have tom sounds in there, they could actually be nicely sidechain compressed as well against kick and snare, because kick and snare are always ruling what's going on in your drum set. Good. So now it's this little build-up with a noise sound that enhances the build-up. And towards the end, what I really like doing, people have been waiting for this for ages. No, just joking. Good old frequency shifter. And one last thing for the sidechain compression, the compressor in all of your groups, the sidechain compressor should always be the last element, because whatever you do before might deteriorate your signal or create additional frequencies or noises or fades or whatever, and you want the sidechain to be absolutely accurate and really create this silence space before the transients. So make sure it's in the end of the chain. Very important. Sometimes I had this once. I had everything. I thought I've done everything right, and then in the end I had an EQ with heavy changes on small little bands, and it created frequencies all over the show, and so I had no zeros before the transient, and I was wondering why that was. But then I figured, okay, no EQ on the master, for one, and the second thing is always have this sidechain stuff happening as the last instance behind EQs and other compressors, flangers, reverbs, or whatever. Otherwise it's just ineffective, right? So what I'm going to do now is, just before it goes into the drop, it just dives down using a little frequency shifter. Dive down and switch off, of course. Very important. I use the mute for that most of the time. Let's just listen to that. Very nice. So actually it comes a bit sudden. So this could be a bit less steep maybe. And the filter build up to also be a bit less drastic. Something else just came to mind. It's just as it happens, because I do this on the fly. I haven't premeditated any of it. So I just had the idea of creating a little lead sound just to make this a bit more round. Why not use Serum as well? Just to show how variable it is. This time pad characteristics, so the randomizer stays up. We choose some different waveforms this time, use a little FM. This time I have a detune within the sound, which creates a movement in the FM modulation once these two oscillators are detuned. Let's see how this all sounds. Again, assignment for the level, a little reverb. See how it sounds. Oh. Just be careful with these envelope modes. Okay, this sounds like what I want. No, medium. Just draw in a little melody. And we can also see that the sidechain compression is very harsh this time. It eats up the melody, so you have to create another channel for this, in this case, and then just take down the ratio. Okay. So, but I do want to have the frequency shifter on this as well. So we just put it on. copied the automation, everything is still the same. Could imagine have a little delay here after the reverb. And of course we need to copy down, or just put the mute on as well. Very silly melody, probably wouldn't use this in the end, but just to show that having it in the same group can create problems on the sidechain part because it's too strong. Maybe sophisticated. Maybe a little bit more sophistication, please. Oh, no, that's the octave. Just wanted to have a quint on top. Let's see how it sounds. Very good. But we need to parallelly use the envelope. Also have a modulation over this FM here, just off grid. So the last line should just be stopped, I suppose. I think it's better to have it off here in the last bar. Additionally, I would like to have the detune again, modulating up and intensifying and derailing the whole thing towards the drop. Good. Now we can get to the bass. Still have a bit of time, so the second big thing, it seems the sidechain is the second big thing, but, well, yeah, it turns out different every time, so everything is important equally, actually. Drums, bass, and sidechain. Well, let's get to that bass now, and Serum is our friend, so that's why I'm going to use Serum again. This time, again, randomized down. Do that first thing because we don't want the bass to wobble around phase-wise. It should be firmly hitting with every trigger the same. Every trigger should be the same. Choose a waveform that is morphing. Is always a smart thing to do, and with very simple waveforms to start with, you can get more complicated or build your own wavetables, of course, if you like, but just to show how this is done with a more simple waveform. Activate the modulating oscillator. So this is modulator only. I'm using FM again. And I'm building a little sequence within the LFO. like a per bar sequence. So let's I've got our F and A. So this has to be modified. It's not the way I wanted it. Exactly, that's the sort of that I wanted. Now we're gonna put a little exactly. So what's happening here? So there is an oscillator A, rather simple waveform, but morphable wavetable. There's a sawtooth as a modulator. In this case, can be anything, just up to experimentation. So this is really something very individual in the end. In this case, it is a sawtooth, and put in a little blending thing, which actually changes the shape of the sound, and yeah, just changes the sound of the modulator, and thus it changes a lot the character of the modulation. So that's what you get. And we do the little stereo trick that we did on the cymbal sound. Okay, so again down to 0, and have this short little envelope control the unison depth. And now we just have it fine-tunable. To apply this to the second as well. See, in this way we have a fixed stereo position that is actually exactly what we want in the end. See what this distortion can do, slightly mixed in. And I'm going to compress the highs, which makes the sound very dramatic. Compensate the highs as well, so they're not too bitey on the mixdown. Okay. Right. Then we're going to use another envelope to build in a second event, so to speak. So this way we get another rhythmical element into this thing. Let's just see what happens if we parallelly assign it to the wavetable position of oscillator A. Okay, and I'm just going to draw in this very, very simple line. Just picking up this theme. From the intro. Okay. Now we just need a sidechain compression. Very tight timing this time, because we don't want to destroy and disrupt the bass line too much. I feel there could be more weight in the kick. And the nice thing is now we have the sidechain on another instance or something else control the sidechain. So the character will still be the same, and we don't need to worry about too much length of the actual kick sound. Okay, and now for mono compatibility freaks, I'll be taking care of the bass a little bit. And there's a nice little mono bass switch on this utility in Ableton. Just to cut everything mono under, say, 130, 145. So that the real bass part of the bass is mono. So it doesn't stereo phase too much and disrupts our signal. To bring a little bit more movement into the whole thing, you actually modulate the level of the sub-oscillator, which then changes the character of the distortion and gives some interesting side effects. Now we're going to go through a couple of modulation changes in the bass. For example, octavate the modulating oscillator. just figured it sounds better if it's more up here and the waveform is changed towards the last position here. So it means I will see and try and see what happens if we just switch the automation around. And also, to make this more dynamic, see what happens if we change the level on the overtone oscillator. Maybe make the sound a little bit more consistent. A bit more electrostatic. We could also see what happens if we take this second part. Well, it's just this because this is switched off, so only A and stabilize the harmonic part of the bass, the up harmonics. This could be one modulation already. See, and it switches into the second octave on the modulation oscillator. Might even wait for the cymbal to kick in. Take that to the next stage. This goes back to where it was already. Or even an octave down, so it's on the same octave as the oscillator A, who's been modulated by this. Give it a little ambience. See, we have some tripleted. Imagine this thing pitching up towards the end of 8 bars. 4 bars. Is it 4 bars? I think it's 4 bars. Yeah, let's have a look how this sounds. So nothing happens in the first 2 bars, but the last 2 bars of the 4, it just slightly pitches up. Let's see how that sounds. So go to the matrix, pillar 05. Assigned to global master tune. Sounds interesting enough. See what happens if we add a nice reverb filter in the end and slightly mix it in. Bass sounds a bit too heavy for the drums, so the drums need to be further processed. Also going to use EQ for that, I suppose, as well. Let's see. Probably make the snare even a bit longer. Okay. All right. Copy the second variation here. Also time to switch up the arrangement of the kicks slightly. Just to see what happens with that. And now, very important, we forgot to copy over the sidechain part. And now be aware of the different position of the kicks. So it means I'm going to do this manually. Okay, just going to copy it over from here. Oops. Ah, that was the part. My bad. Okay. It's good to filter these drums down and make a bit more of an idea of these drums. And have them filter up or something. So this way we have some variations octavating the modulating oscillator, for example, changing some modulation intensities, so to speak, just optimizing various positions of some parameters, for example, wavetable position, in this case the wave bending position. Could do filter, could be various types of things really. Also switching up the waveform of the sub can help sometimes. Just gets different overtones, everything that takes you off so that there's no fatiguing over these 64 bars, about 32 bars in this case. Right, so we've got 32 bars. Could add another 16 bars here and then go to the bridge, or just go to the bridge, just to make you see how this works. As you can see, there's nothing on the master, so it means it's very important for me to, or should be important to anyone really, to not mix into a cluttered master in terms of like putting EQs on, putting limiters on. All that stuff should be applied when the mix is already there. So this is sounding as like it sounds without doing anything to the master. And if you do apply anything at all, which, I mean, you have to do something about the level in the end, I would use a simple clipper. And for that, I'm going to use the glue compressor, for example. Put the range down, which means it doesn't compress, it only clips, and then just have my ears decide how far to go into the soft clipping. There's a slight distortion point where the subby end of the kick meets the bass frequency. That you can easily hear on the master now, and therefore there's one more thing regarding the sidechain compression that should be applied in this case. The goal is to avoid the clashing of subby kick elements with the actual bass frequency. So for that, we're going to use the multiband dynamics for sidechaining, and only compress the low end, and use, this time we really use the drums. Drum rack. Yeah, we use the the drums. The drums are grouped here, so we can to be sure that everything drum is actually used as a sidechain signal whenever it occurs. We use the drums for the drum group for the sidechain input. This time there is no EQ because it's split into 3 bands. Simple as that. And you can decide where these bands are, where the transitions are. And I just leave them as they are, and everything below 120 is being compressed whenever there's information for that. So we might see what happens if this is... As you can see, that the low end of the kick is heavily influencing the sidechain band on the lows, and it is exactly doing what it should do. It is compressing the bass. The bass makes space for the kick body to come through cleanly. The result of that is no more additional distortion. Okay. So that's all there is to know in terms of the production. We didn't finish the song now, so it is a matter of building up towards the bridge, taking it back to this part. So what actually happens now is just roughly, just to have it already there, copying over. So no need to tell that there is prolonged part of this as well for the first main, because 32 bars is actually too short for a main. So this should be double the length, and then you can look into going to the bridge, and then having another few changes on the second drop. Which could mean, well, let's do, for example, halftime. In mind, we are in the sidechain compression, which is not what we wanted right now. Okay, so so the same has to happen to the other signal, to the sidechain signal. Okay. And then switch up something in the bass already. To have another switch up of elements. Let's see what happens if we octavate the oscillator A. Very effective, to be honest. I would actually use this. And then, of course, reintroducing the pad here wouldn't hurt either. It's just an example, you know. We're not building the ultimate track right now, but sort of giving you an idea of how this track building flow is meant to be. Just filter it up. switched off is a problem, so I need to switch it back on, of course. Maybe come out of the blur from below and then get into the clean this time regarding the detune of the unison. Yeah, that works. Opening up the filter. Maybe taking it even more up this time. Well, there's nothing wrong in using the same sweep here again. And there's a nice plugin here called M-Rhythmizer, which I really like. Which is giving you the opportunity to add different pitchings to your sound. But apart from it, it can completely re-pitch a sound, it can slow a sound down, it can rearrange a whole drum loop. And I'm going to show you how to do this. So by dragging this line down, you octave, or no, you don't octave, you just pitch things up. Whereas this is pitching it down linearly. Slowing it down while playing, speeding it up while playing, but pitching down. It's hard to explain, really. You really have to test it out. So now I'm hitting the quint above the octave. And that sounds like this. Just dry wet mixing and you'll see what I'm getting at. No, I want to apply it to, not to the strings, I want to apply it to this thing. And keep in mind, compressor, always the last instance, sidechain compressor. Okay, now let's hear it again. No, this is octaving it. It's just putting it up an octave, exactly. This is taking it up to octave plus 5 semitones, 7 semitones. And it compensates on the length, so it pitches it up and it got shorter now, but it compensates on the length and just re-looping it at the right points. Just slightly increase the dry-wet. But this problem, this plugin has one problem though. When you reach the 50%, it takes down a level. So it doesn't keep the same energy all the way through from dry to wet. So it's up here and it goes down too much and it goes up again to where it was before level-wise. So what to do with this? You need to copy it to a return track instead, and then just have it fully wet and then just mix it in as you needed it. introducing it slowly here, and then getting louder and louder. Of course, you need to silence this as well here, just to make sure everything is silent in the second main. Taking it back to normal speed in terms of the beats and everything, just making sure that the sidechain is always adapted to what's going on in the drums regarding kick and snare drum. Right? So it's very important, otherwise you end up in a chaos. Might be interesting to experiment with that, having different gain reduction points than the actual drum material is giving us, but I suppose everybody sees the problem here if it's not applied correctly. Yeah, and then last but not least, fade out, or just reintroduce the pad. Maybe do something to the pads, adding or taking something away, stripping it down, or having just these bass parts here coming in again. This has to be on again, of course, very important. And here we have the same thing. This time I want to increase or at least have the detune at a higher rate, at a higher point. This is all very plain. I'd probably look into some additional delay. And of course, have the compressor as the last instance. Looking at the spectrum, the RMS spectrum is the one that I'm using sometimes. Less and less, though, it's just a brief control of what's going on. As you can see, there's a little hole here in the mid region. So I would see to that and definitely do something about it. But as we are still in the green and didn't mangle anything yet too much, we have tons of room to change our EQ curve. Minus 4.8, it's probably popping above -4 on the RMS, with the sub giving the most impact. which is always the case in my tunes, as long as you know my tunes. Well, actually, it has changed after 2010, I think. That's when it's become like this. So sub is much more prominent than it was in my early days. So that's just as I think the spectrum should be. It's more or less linear, with a little bit of smiley face, not too much though. The sub giving the most impact, the most energy on the RMS spectrum, and everything between -4 and -25 at 16K, and then just give it a linear thing. It's just to see if there's anything missing, really. But I think that should be that's what we should hear as well in the first place, and not control every sound before it goes into the mix. Okay, so this is pretty much it, I would say. The song is not finished yet, so final touches would have to be made. And not only that, I'll probably add another arpeggio line here using the same material, but we'll get to arpeggios in the track deconstruction, which is going to be the next video. So for now, that's it for the track creation. Thanks. In our second part of the masterclass, we're going to talk about a track deconstruction. It's going to be one of my tunes on Blackout. It came out last year, called Overturn. I'm going to play it just briefly. Just gonna skip through it. Just to show the little changes here and there. Okay, that should get a quick overview. So the song starts with an operator sound. It's more or less an E-piano sound that is made via modulation of all the operators involved in the first scheme here. So one operator modulates the other one, and yeah, to not have a too harsh sound, let's switch off the operator above. This would have been simple sine wave, right? And just bringing in the other operators gives it tons of overtones, just like in the E-piano sounds. And we've got a long delay focusing on the higher spectrum, so the lower end fades out earlier. And a bit of a supporting EQ and a phaser that's been automated off at some point. So, and as we listen to the song, we hear that there's string pads underneath. This is written in G, but it is ultimately A. As you can see, the pitch plugin shows +2 semitones, which is giving us an A minor chord, minor 7 +2, and that function gives us a very lush and nice intro. Just right underneath this track, we've got the same line, just copied down, but with a slightly changed sound. So the waveform of oscillator B has changed. Then we have another envelope for the envelope. The overall envelope is different, as we have an arpeggio sound. Wouldn't be much used, wouldn't make much sense to use a string pad this time. As you can hear, it just comes in very from below, so to speak. Has a lot of high cut frequencies and just opens up slightly towards the drop. Just opening up more and more. Similar delay, but this time focusing slightly more on the mids. And the additional melody track here features sort of a vintage pad sound. It's done by a very simple sawtooth that has been master tune modulated with a bipolar function here around the original pitch with a rate of 5.6 hertz. And let's give us that vintage feel. It's just increasing in level towards the end. Okay, so what happened here? So something was like pitched down as a whole thing, and I used M-Rhythmizer for it. As I explained in the other video, this is a really cool plugin that enables you to pitch the sound, pitch bend the sound, rearrange beats, and do all kinds of things that has to do with pitch. And using this kind of logarithmical curve here gives you a slowdown, a pitch slowdown to a certain point, and it's doing this per bar. And as we have a dry-wet automation here over 1 bar, it just shows us that 1 bar of slowing down. Done, and then it's just switched off here, just muted. All right, so that's how this leads into the drop of first, let's explore the drums a little bit here in the intro still. So these are real drums coming from Addictive Drums. And this time, where I went for real drum sound, I actually applied something on the higher spectrum as well, because you can hear that the snare is pretty subdued on here, because I wanted something high-tech, something synthy as the higher noise end of the spectrum. And I just ended up using Serum again and having lots of noise information there. Addictive Drums in general is just a very compact way of using real drums with a mixer, with mixable overheads, room mic, an additional buzz, send effects if you want, that I hardly or don't use at all. I don't know why these are open actually. I haven't used them here. All right. Oh, maybe not. Maybe they were on. Stop. Okay. So you've got the dry sounds here with each one mic, except for snare and kick, which have two mics, and you can balance them here. You can even mix in the talk over, it's called snare bus. It's very interesting. So you can actually have the sound coming from the whole drum set and mix it into your snare drum sound. Or no, actually, and decide how much of the snare buzz goes into the mix. Very interesting. So if you hit the kick and you put this up, you hear the snare buzz along with the kick. It's just brought into the mix. Very interesting. Certainly not the only program that features that, but it's a good thing to have, especially when it comes to sounding more natural. As for drums, okay, EQs, pitch envelopes, whatnot, a lot of things are really helpful. And an interesting thing here to mention is maybe the tone designer, not used in this track, but there's like a blueprint of overtones for each recorded drum sound, and you can apply them with this little envelope here. It's very nice to have drums to give them more character, to actually really see what can I do with this snare drum other than just playing it out or distorting it or EQing it. So that's actually very nice. I like that. So that's a very brief overview of what you can do. Band selective distortion, sound wrapping, tape saturation, even there's even a transient shaper in here, saturator, overall cut filter. It's all you need to make some real drum action going. Okay. This is going into a very slight reverb here. See, so there's a little whoosh here towards the end of this part, and the filtering is also made in a little different manner. So the movement of the filter cut, low cut, upwards is just on the mid spectrum. So you still have the side spectrum doing its thing. And this gives a weird stereo effect towards the drop. Sort of intensifies the blur. Here we have the same drums, but just a little beefed up. See, it's a bit longer, louder, beefier, still being accompanied by this noisy stuff coming from Serum. Here we have a contrasting drum loop, also with addictive drums, but this time differently processed, while this is downward expanded. See, this one is compressed on the lower end of the dynamics. Giving you that very clangy feel. And yeah, so this way you get the ultimate contrast between these two things. Like every end of 8 bars, you've got 2 bars of a contrasting loop. And that goes on in different variations till the mid part. And now let's explain what's going on in the bass here. This is a strange one as well. So originally it was without the Rhythmizer plugin, which made it necessary to repitch the whole thing. So I'll repitch it to its original position to show you what this sounded like in the beginning. Oops, something went wrong here. What was that? Okay, I need to put it up, not down. My fault. So this is what the bass line was before. So that was pretty straightforward, everything on the one, and very clean positions, too clean for my ears. I want to have some syncopic stuff going on, and there's nothing better than Rhythmizer to actually make that happen in a very, very interesting manner. So I switched it on and found, okay, if I pitch this up in a linear mode, 5 semitones, don't ask me what this is for. I mean, I use this with my experience that I have now, so it means this is 5 semitones pitch up. So it speeds up. It's like repitched, you know. It's not stretched or anything. So it keeps the original. It's like it resampled, and due to it being much shorter now, it has to recompensate on the loop, so it keeps on looping till the next position, and that ends up being like this in the end. Oops, sorry. There you have the syncopated positions of the overlapping loop things that are already happening now, but the thing is the whole bass line needs to be repitched, and that's what happened here. So I'm just taking these off again. There you go. And these adjustments here on the timing are actually there to make sure it's really starting on the second quarter. So you've got exactly the right position. Because it was a bit tricky before, so it came a bit too early, and then the sidechain kicked in while it was already starting, And we need an accurate timing, so I figured, okay, 20 milliseconds is doing exactly what's needed to make this syncopated bass line going exactly the way it should. And then you've got this sort of talking bass, a lot of notches moving along, gives it that nasal sound. See, and this is only like octaved down and up, up and down, up and down, up and down until the mid part. Okay, then there is the melody coming in again at bar 97, just being reintroduced, but we're still on the cold side, so to speak. And then the warm pads again. Right. Drums coming in again. And here we've got the same thing happening again with the pitch down. And what's happening here, we have instant off heads as a part to them building up throughout the drum arrangement here, along with a change in the bass sound, obviously. So the modulating operator or oscillator is pitched up 2 octaves, giving it that screamy sound. That's how it was before at 0, and now it's at 2. And that goes on for a little bit. Okay, so this sound, this bass sound, used to be this one, but it's now slightly altered. And what I did on top of the tuning curve that we have already in the original bass in the first part, is a second LFO, LFO number 4. Additionally, pitching the whole sound just slightly, depth 8, so that's not much. It's just by 1 or 2 semitones maximum, and it's doing it bipolar as well, so it means around the original pitch here. So get my point. This is sort of giggling that's actually happening here in the second part, while the overtones are screaming in a different way, and it's been taken down to 1 octave. So it's a B 1 octave. And back to 0. As you can see, there's a switch on and off of oscillator A, making it even more contrasty. It actually just starts already here with the start of the bass line. And this is just an on-off automation of oscillator A, giving it that super contrasty, event-rich theme in the bass scale. So this is something that came afterwards as well, because it just needed to be taken back a little bit, minimalized in some way. Okay, so what do we have? What else? Maybe I should say something about the side chaining that's happening here. Because as opposed to what I did in the first project with the one-band compression with look-ahead and an alternate signal, and not using the original drum signal to trigger the gain reduction for the sidechain, I have been using the multiband compressor to compress the mids and lows. Lows compression is what I told you before, is like to avoid the collision of sub-elements or in the kick drum and bass. So it's rather a technical thing, whereas the mid part is a hearable effect thing. Yeah, it's not made to make space or anything, at least not in a technical way. Whereas the one-band compression, the very harsh, the very toothy gain reduction is something else. This is more suitable for the real drum and bass tracks that I've done. So many of these tracks feature this multiband compression in this very way. So you have a very wide band in the mids that is being sidechain compressed, and the timing, as you can see, is quite légère. So it's not that tight, to be honest. So it's rather like really, it's breathing. Yeah. So whenever there's a drum, like a drum coming, and that's mainly the mids, so it's hardly affected by the highs, by the hi-hats and cymbals and stuff that's going on in the highs. It's much more affected by kick and snare. And yeah. And the good part is you automatically have relatively short sounds, because a long kick drum has a lot of low frequency information, because it just goes on longer and pitches down for a longer time. Whereas here, you only grab the mid part of these drums. And this is actually interesting, because you have a relatively short signal that can be used without many problems, without the gain reduction being down too long. And as I said, it's rather for that breathing effect, for that very natural breathing effect that suits the usage of analog vintage drums or real drums in general. So that's been applied a couple of times. So we've got this here on the bass, as you can see, and we also have that on the pads. Different. You can't pre-hear it because you have to have the drums playing, but you can clearly hear the difference. We have a limiter here that's not been used. On the spectrum side of things, we have a very similar spectrum to the first track I've shown you. Maybe a bit more mids this time. And as you see, 16K has it at around 26 decibels RMS, whereas the bass is playing the main part in the loudness, really, in the overall level of the track. Yeah, it's coming on around 5 -5.6 at this moment. I'm sure if I play through the song, it's going to be -4, -5. So that's the same thing. Totally different track, of course. But yeah, I think that's a pretty common curve here that you can find in most of my tunes in these days. Okay, what else? Did I forget anything? I think that was it. There's a track that's not been used, it can be killed, of course. Then the rhythmizer stuff, that is giving a totally different perspective on how to write a bass line or tunes in general, because it's such a strange little program that actually makes a lot of things that you don't expect at first, and then when you learn how to juggle with these things, then it's really funny. A lot of fun, actually, not funny. All right, I think that was it so far for the track deconstruction. And yeah, hope to catch you on one of my one-on-ones at sound teams in the future as well. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed the master classes. This is Current Value for Sound Teams, and I'm out. Bye-bye.